In this episode, I chat with relationship and intimacy expert Alexandra Stockwell, who is redefining what intimacy means. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Abundance Hack Show, where we are inspiring you to ditch the outdated beliefs, release the blocks, and fully embrace your sovereignty so you can confidently expand to allow more love, joy, and aligned success in your life. I am Niajae, your conscious accountability partner, reminding you that abundance is your birthright. Hey M&Ms, thank you for tuning into the Abundance Hack Show. What are you manifesting in your life today? Today's guest is Alexandra Stockwell, and we have a really interesting story. So you know I'm totally transparent with you guys. So I want to give you some background. I met Alexandra at a podcast seminar, and we filmed an episode like when I first launched my podcast, which now is like well over a year ago, and we talked about intimacy. But I'll be really honest with you guys. I was in a place where all of my theories were just that, theories, because I was single and I had a lot of married friends. And so in my head, oh, here's the solution to their problem. And it's simple. And it wasn't until I got into a relationship and I actually have an intimacy coach now that I really understood the depths of intimacy. So I had this idea in my head excuse me, that was simple. And I had to realize that this is not as easy as I probably thought in my head. And so I invited Alexandra to come back and do another podcast episode, but I am going to load the original one because it is a lot of golden nuggets in there that I think a lot of people will find benefit in. But I wanted to really dive into intimacy in this episode and just where I'm at in my life, having an intimacy coach that she actually introduced me to, which is really amazing. So welcome back. Thank you again for coming on. So I'll have the original episode in the show notes. So definitely go check that out. If you're married, if you've hit kind of a monotonous place in your marriage, definitely go check that out. But I want to talk about just like the foundation of intimacy in this episode, because I think that there's so many taboo topics and misunderstandings of what intimacy is. And I find myself when I say I have an intimacy coach, I'm like, it's not about sex. I always give that disclaimer. It's not about sex. It's about building that true connection, self-discovery, discovering like your partner. So we're going to dive into what intimacy is. And thank you again for coming. So yeah, before we dive in, what does abundance mean to you?
Abundance means acceptance and there's a way in which knowing that I'm fine with nothing that has me realize how much abundance there actually is. I'm going to say a little bit more about that because I was having a conversation with someone recently and another coach, and she was actually saying her company has exploded this year. I think in August, this is Sarah Longoria, if anyone wants to look her up. In August of 2019, she had an unusually low month. This wasn't typical, but she made $1,000 in August. And she's been making multiple six-figure months since April, May, or June. I'm not sure exactly when. And she's on target. She's 3 years in business and she's on target to make $1 million. And she was telling me that part of her process has included realizing that if she lost her husband, children, home, she was homeless and alone, she knows she'll be fine and she'll build again. And there's a way in which detaching from the usual expressions of success has been the key to massive success. And I had that conversation in my head when I gave my answer that there's a way in which we have access to abundance when it doesn't define us.
So powerful. And I 100% relate to that. There's an exercise that we actually do with Antisa called Fear Inventory. And it's really just facing the things that you're afraid of, because when you acknowledge them and honor them, it's almost like they don't have power over you anymore. So facing that thing that you're most afraid of, like what is the worst thing that could happen, and then realizing like, okay, if this thing happened, I'd be okay. If I lose this client or if I lose my business, I've lost, I don't want to say lost a business, but I owner financed my dance studio, and she completely ran it into the ground, still owing me like $80,000. And to me, like losing $80,000 would completely destroy some people. But obviously there's different levels of business, but at the time, to me, that was like, what am I going to do? My world came crumbling down, but I survived. And now knowing that if the worst case scenario happens, you will be okay, is really powerful.
It's really powerful. And I think there are a lot of times when being willing to let go is actually the path to more connection. So let's get into it. I feel like we're like pointing from all these good places towards intimacy. And I guess I just want to say right off the bat that it is a deep topic. And it doesn't have to be heavy. It can be fun and lighthearted, but it is a deep topic. And I feel like there's so many concepts or words which are really profound, and then they get used a lot, and the meaning and the potency gets diluted. And actually, I think we're in the process of that happening to the word intimacy. It's thrown around a lot, and at least in new age kind of spiritual circles, it might be like hashtag into me you see. And there are all these different like quips for talking about it. And to me, that actually pushes us further away from the very refined, nuanced essence of what intimacy actually is. And so, like, into me you see, that's kind of a common one. Have you heard of that? Yeah.
Yes.
And to me, I think it reveals something helpful, but it also functions to keep us in our head and be a little bit protected from feeling more deeply what intimacy is all about. It's like if we can intellectually wrap our minds around it, then it's more comfortable, but from my point of view, not in a positive sense.
Wow. So I know you taught a class redefining intimacy. So let's start before we redefine it. Let's define it. What is your definition of intimacy?
The main thing that I usually begin with is distinguishing emotional intimacy and sensual intimacy. They come from the same essence, but if someone is listening and they're inclined when they hear intimacy to think sex, then that derails the conversation. And if someone thinks emotional intimacy, there's usually further that we can go in understanding one another. And of course, there can be amazing intimacy with a friend, but there's a way in which, in the context of marriage or romantic partnership of any kind, if we go too far in the emotional intimacy realm, then we're cutting off from the wholeness that's possible in intimate connection. So if I go back to English class and give a very concise definition, and I don't use the word, let me see what I would say. I haven't actually been asked this question this way, and I really like the question, but actually what I'm doing right now is what I would call being intimate with myself. Rather than rushing it and coming up with an answer and moving on, I'm just, even though I'm talking, I'm taking a moment to feel into what my definition is. Intimacy is the experience of connectedness, which includes mystery and possibility. That's my working definition of as of this moment.
Mm. So when you redefine intimacy, it's taking society's definition or society's understanding of what it is, and I feel like taking it to another level. So what was your inspiration for the class redefining intimacy?
Well, all of us, whether it's at the forefront of our conscious mind or not, as human beings, we yearn for connection. Now, how much connection and what that looks like, that obviously is going to vary highly. But one of our fundamental yearnings and our internal makeup is that we want to feel seen and heard and experience connection. And there's actually tons of data on the consequences of lack of connection. In fact, depression, drug addiction, joining a cult, like a lot of the what used to be bigger themes in society nowadays. I'm living in California where the air quality is terrible and there's so many fires and the circumstances politically in our country, like all of the intensity is up a lot. But in the old form of intensity, meaning addiction, divorce, which sometimes can, of course, be positive. I'm not really lumping it in there, but depression, suicide, all of those things are the result of a lack of connection. Not only, but also. And so I'm just wanting to be really clear that as human beings, we yearn for connection, although what that's going to look like is going to vary for each person. And I teach people how to feel more connected to themselves and how to feel more connected to other people. And when we talk about wanting more connection or wanting more intimacy or any of those kinds of things, people usually know they want more, but have no idea how to proceed. It's like if you think of Mel Robbins' book, I can't remember the exact title, you might know it, but like do the next thing or do one thing. Like if you want to go from where you are to somewhere else, you take a step and then you take the next step and then you take the next step. But in general, our definitions and understandings in society of what connection actually is or what intimacy is or what a good marriage is, quite frankly, we know those words, we know we want it, but there's a real lack of intellectual clarity, which is required for us to know what's the next step to take. So often when people want more connection, they sit in a bit of, I don't know what to do next. Mm-hmm. Like, I want it, but what do I do? Where do I go? What changes do I make in myself that are going to create that result? So I wanted to address that conundrum for the many people who really want connection, who would be helped by my redefining intimacy and in the process laying out the landscape. And then we move from a sense of needing to bushwhack our way into intimacy and connection and have much more of a sense of a path before us that we can then walk down.
I love it. There's so much I want to touch on. So one of the things that I discovered about myself in my intimacy coaching is that I had a picture in my head and I was attached to that picture. And I had to almost, I want to say dissect, but dissect that picture of like, is this what I truly want? Or is this what society says I should want? Is this what society says a relationship should look like, or connection should look like, or a marriage should look like? And I had these pictures, and then getting deeper into it, I'm like, is this actually what I want? Or is this what I've been programmed to want? And so I think that the first step for me in understanding what intimacy meant to me was really peeling back the layers of what I truly desire. And I know, like the quarantine, for example, I glittered my wall and I made a whole bunch of changes to my house. I sold my couch, I moved my bed into my living room. And I know that's like not what you're supposed to do. You're bed is not supposed to be in your living room technically. And so it made me think like, okay, where, but it made me so happy. Like I literally, like, I love my place. It's unorthodox, but I love it. So it opened up this, like, where else in my life am I not doing something because society says it should be this way or look this way? And so I feel the same way about relationships or connection. We think it's supposed to look a certain way or be a certain way or sometimes feel a certain way. And we haven't really explored what feels good to us.
Yes, I have a few different directions I want to go in response, but I'm going to start with this one. So I'm a physician. I don't practice medicine anymore because I focus entirely on being a relationship and intimacy coach. But I did practice medicine for a while. And when I was in medical school, I remember being in a bookstore, and the medical school that I attended was both a medical school and a school for nurses and physical therapists. I forget what. And so it must have been in the social work section of the bookstore. In the psychology section, I remember picking up a book that I ended up buying, and it refers to the opening of Anna Karenina, this great work of literature. And the opening of Anna Karenina, which is about this woman's yearning for connection, is how I'm going to describe it in this context. I never would have said that in a literature class in high school, but it works for right now. So the opening of Anna Karenina is, every happy family is happy in the same way. Every unhappy family is unique in its unhappiness. And that's from Anna Karenina. However, the author of this psychology textbook in the social work or nursing section actually says that's wrong. The reality is that every unhappy family is unhappy according to patterns and predictability. Every happy family is unique in its happiness and discovers its own way. So how does that relate here? Well, for you, not family, but individual, for you, having your bed in the living room lights you up. That is a way for you to uniquely be happy, and following the prescription of beds being in bedrooms, and even which room in the apartment is assigned to function as the bedroom. That is following a pattern. It doesn't make everybody unhappy, but there's a way in which it's unconscious and patterned. And what I love so much in how you talk is that some people, when they contemplate reevaluating their desires and conditioning and the origin of all the things they're doing in life, it can just feel overwhelming. And they can go kind of into a victim state. Like, how do you start from scratch when you're a fully formed human? But you're not talking about it that way. You're talking about it, I'm saying all this. You and I, while we have mutual adoration, don't actually know one another that well. So you can confirm if this is true or not. But my sense is that your exploration about glitter on your wall and putting the bed in your bedroom is based on this foundation of self-exploration. And it didn't start with wondering where to put your bed. It started with wanting to know yourself better. It started with your relationship with yourself, which then had a ripple effect that went all the way into your interior design. If someone's listening and it's like, let me reassess everything, and it can get kind of analytical or emotionally overwhelming, that is the result of looking at the externals and working from there. But you're talking about having done this magnificent, ongoing, evolving personal growth work and letting it come into full expression all the way into the furniture. And it really makes sense that you would be sharing this while we're talking about intimacy, because that is a form of living intimately with yourself.
It starts there. Yeah. How can you be intimate with someone else if you haven't been intimate with yourself? Yeah. That's where
Well, actually, I wanna step on that. Like, that is true when we think of it intellectually. Like, how
okay.
can you be intimate with yourself, with someone else, if you can't be intellectual with yourself? However, in my work with couples, and I've also done some interesting work coaching a mother-son pair, two sisters, like people who understand my contribution around relationships, even though they're not a romantic couple, they've asked me to coach them. And while we can intellectually separate intimacy with self and intimacy with other, what I think is so transformative, and why I sometimes refer to to couples relationships as the ultimate vehicle for personal growth, is that in the moment it's really both and. So as you interact with another person, it reveals the way in which you're disconnected from yourself. And as you put attention on healing and reconnecting with yourself, you simultaneously are open for more connection with your beloved. And that also works vice versa. When you put your attention on on your way of being so that you're more connected with your beloved, the very natural simultaneous consequence is that you improve your connection with yourself. So I just think it's one of those things that it is helpful to analytically separate the steps, and it is much more holographic and synergistic and simultaneous in action.
That makes me think about something Antisa says to me about getting out of my head and into my body. So you mentioned feel into. You said the term feel into, and I think that that's another part of intimacy, is connecting to your body and your feelings and your emotions and your intuition, because I'm someone who is very analytical and very in my head and like, okay, well, this should pan out this way because of this data and this data, this data, but not allowing myself to actually feel. And I think that that is where I was missing the connection of like, okay, just in our previous interview, I'm just like, okay, just reignite the flame. Just like what was it that started, you guys being connected and falling in love? So like do that again, because in my head it makes sense because of the data, like, but actually feeling into what feels right and not using data because it's going to look different for everyone, and giving yourself permission to release. And this is literally me speaking, like, to me, release what you thought it was going to look like, to create space for that magic to happen between you and whoever you're connecting with.
I want to shift it slightly if you're open to that,
Of course.
because I think it's a matter of expanding what's included in your data set. So rather than making it about paying attention to the data or not using the data and paying attention to your feelings, to instead honor your feelings as so real that they get upgraded to the status of relevant data points. Because otherwise, it's chaotic and random, and that's not actually true. Like, we have principles and ways of approaching things that we can use with analysis and intellectual consideration of the data points. And when we are intimate with ourselves, I'll say, and honor our experience. It's not even so much honoring our feelings, because feelings do come and go. And so I think sometimes if you use the expression a data point, it's like, it's there, it's in the ground, it's not going anywhere. And that is not how feelings are. However, our experience, which includes our feelings, when that is honored as valuable data, then you get to dance with your smart mind and the wholeness of your experience in your body and in your emotions as well. And that creates intimate experiences. I want to get super practical. So if someone's listening and they're like, okay, that sounds good, but what am I going to do? Or what is she talking about? Either way, I've got something for you. And um, when I'm saying something to someone and it just doesn't feel connected, when I say the exact same thing, if it were a script, I could be reading the exact same words, but I say it with more of my attention in my heart, or I say it with vulnerability, or I slow down in order to make eye contact while I say it. I can say the exact same thing, but because I'm bringing more of myself to the interaction, it will result in connection. So, to get back very specifically to what you and I were just talking about, if it's just the intellectual data points, then all I want to do is convey information. But if I include my internal experience and my emotions in the communication, then the result is that we get to feel connected after I've made it.
I love that. I love that. And it actually feels good to me because it's not like, okay, get out of your head and into your body. It's honor both. Honor both.
I feel very strongly about that.
Mm.
I've been in a number of circumstances where in new age personal growth settings where it's like, well, yes, we need to follow desires and emotions, and I agree with all of that, but let's not denigrate our thinking. I'm a big both and person.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I love that is it improv, like the yes and. So I try to
Yes.
take like but out of my vocabulary and I say yes and instead of saying like but. Yeah, I love that. If you were looking for a sign, here it is. This is your reminder to not settle, to know your worth, and to follow your bliss. This is a reminder to maintain alignment and show up in your fullest expression. Abundant and Aligned Society is an accountability program to remind you that you are a powerful being and you deserve to live the life you truly desire. Go to niajae.com/society to join in on the magic because life is meant to be abundant. One of the posts that really caught my attention of yours, you said, and there's a reason I think when I got into the relationship that I'm in, I had a picture in my head of like what intimacy was, what sex was, like what men want. And I realized that society paints these pictures for us and we think that this is how it is. And there was something you said that I thought was extremely powerful. You posted something along the lines of like, I'm an overweight woman and I have great sex.
Yes,
And
I'm 52. I'm overweight. I've been married for 24 years, and I have extraordinary sex.
I feel like that, like there's so much to unpack in that because I think that society leads you to believe that, well, you know, I've been married this long, so of course I'm tired of having sex with my partner. Or, you know, people, when you see advertisements or media, the people that look like they're having the great sex are like, you know, thin model looking type guys, or women and like buff guys and sexy women in bikinis. Like they paint this picture. And I think that it limits people because they think, okay, well, I don't look like that, or I don't have this kind of relationship, or this, or I'm this age, so I can't have amazing sex, or I can't have intimacy after a certain period of time. So can you dive into that?
Yes, thank you. So I think one of the questions is, what is good sex?
Mm.
So let's riff a little. Do you have an answer to that question?
No.
Okay.
No,
Well,
I think that like I'm exploring what it means to me, you know, like I'm in that place right now exploring like what does it mean to me, because I've had all these pictures of like this is what it should look like, and being open to, okay, well, let's explore like what you like, what I like, because I had a picture in my head of like, oh well, this is what men like, but men are different. And then I had a picture in my head of like, okay, this is what I like, but it was also just a theory. So when you're in the moment, it's like, okay, what do I really like, and giving myself permission to honor whatever comes up when I truly ask myself that question.
so beautiful. I just love how you say that. Okay, well, let's just say what good sex is not, because that is actually much easier to kind of get into. Good sex, in my opinion, is not when, we'll talk in heteronormative terms, but it absolutely applies with sex between two men, two women, or any other identification of the participants. Good sex is not when she is paying attention to what he's going to enjoy.
Hmm.
Whatever that means, if that means faking orgasm, if that means only positioning your body in a particular way that you think is going to be flattering, only having sex in the dark, only, keeping your bra on so that your breasts are perky during sex until the last minute. Like, there are a million variations in which it's common for women to adjust their experience in order to control their partner's experience.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about paying attention to your partner's experience so it feels good. That's great. I'm talking about having essentially your partner's experience guide your own in a way that is limiting. Now, the reverse happens for men, because I think in the culture in general, there is a complete lack of appreciation for the tremendous performance pressure that is put on men.
Mm.
And we're talking now about good-hearted men who are gonna want their women sex partners to be enjoying themselves. And men are supposed to somehow get to adulthood having the key to ecstasy, so that when they encounter a woman and her body, they know exactly what to do. Now, that is a tall enough order on its own, but you add porn, which for the most part is creating neurological associations with false information about what creates pleasure for a woman. This
Mm-hmm.
is a recipe for a lot of bad sex.
Mm-hmm.
And never mind adding the boredom or monotony that comes with sex in the same place with the same person for years. And so it's really no surprise there aren't that many people studying the quality of sex in long-term relationships. There's plenty of data about sexual disease transmission and things of that sort, but there's not a lot of data, and there aren't that many people who want to put money into it, or institutions. But one of them are condom makers. So Durex, the condom maker, interviewed 29,000 couples,
Wow.
and 54% of them were dissatisfied with the quality of their intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, my view may be skewed, but I think it is so much higher. And there are some studies that show 84%. It's such a subjective thing to study anyway. But this is all to convey a lot about the bad sex most people are having. And there's like bad sex where you have an orgasm, and bad sex where you don't have an orgasm, bad sex where you feel comfortable, and bad sex where you feel awkward. Okay. In contrast, I think extraordinary sex is when, through connecting with someone else, you access new aspects of yourself. I can say unequivocally, I mean, I am overweight. I have a belly that sometimes I do not, I appreciate Zoom. It's not here for everyone to see. Like, I am definitely, I don't say this with as much pride as it sounds like. I would like to lose weight, but I am overweight. And one of the, I'll say a number of the different things that completely evolved my sex life, because it was not always this way. We had lots of years of going months and months without sex, and we didn't have time. We were both working 60 to 100 hours a week early in our marriage because we were physicians in training and then physicians. And anyway, all I mean to say is that the fact that I now just, like, every time is amazing, that's not luck. That is me taking my devotion to personal growth into the realm of sensuality and sexuality. So I want to be really clear about that. And my just being willing to be with my experience, similar to what we were talking about earlier in terms of allowing emotions to be part of the communication, that was one of the most key changes. So when I am in complete acceptance of who I am, so it's not that I'm thinking, oh, I'm overweight and it's okay. I'm just not thinking about being overweight. I am feeling the sensations in all of my flesh and allowing those sensations, every single one of them, to function as a bridge to being connected to my husband. So there actually are times when I used to, when things were really good, have my attention on myself and my experience. And that's awesome. And I am not knocking it. But what has it be really extraordinary is to both and my attention on what my experience is without internally disconnecting. So if I'm getting close to orgasm, I used to pull my attention into my own body to enjoy it. But then afterwards, we don't feel quite as connected as when I have my attention on my own body and my own experience, and also remain in connection with him. And I just have two more things to say about this. One is that when sex is that way, then every time it deepens the relationship and becomes more gratifying. And I have a former client who had been married and then got divorced and is in a new, beautiful relationship of, I forget how many years now, 6 or 7. It's not a new relationship. And she said, I love novelty, and I'm just concerned that it's just the natural consequence of a long-lasting relationship that the novelty disappears. And I'm so grateful she said that, because then I could hear myself give an answer. This is something I had taken for granted but never really talked about, because novelty in a long-term relationship looks totally different. For a one-night stand or early in a relationship, novelty is literally new experiences, a new body, new responses, new positions, new locations. Like, it is truly new. My husband and I are not going to have a whole lot of newness like that. I mean, we could, but we have 4 children and we have a full life, and we're not exploring new possibilities of kink, or, like, there are ways to continue to have new experience, but that's not how our life is set up. But what makes it new is that, let's say, during literal intercourse, we both have a high quality of attention, and one or the other of us will make the millimeter shift in how our bodies are connected, and suddenly it's a new experience. And that comes from increased attention and novelty that is a result of depth rather than breadth in new experiences.
So powerful. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Like, I feel like go back and listen to that M&Ms and like really let that sink in. And I think being present is one of the keys of intimacy, just fully being present. And that's something that I don't think I fully understood. And we have so many things pulling at our attention. And I'm definitely someone who worries about, like, is this a good angle? How does my booty look like? And so I can see how that would take away from the actual experience. So there's so much to explore and so much depth to it. And yeah, I don't think I fully understood until I started diving into like what intimacy truly is, and holding space for your partner to say, I'd prefer this, or this doesn't feel good, and not taking it personally. And I think that that was something interesting for me as well, of like, just so okay, I want to touch on maybe confidence, or but like another layer of confidence, because we could, you know, feel confident about how we look, but how we're showing up and being vulnerable to where it's
You know
like
what, let me say one more thing.
okay.
And I am saying this specifically in the context of committed partners. For whatever weird reason in the evolution of society, there's a way in which sex has become something which most people approach in a way where it's like my point of view or your point of view. It's like how I look, or anyway, what I want to say is that I think one of the things which is transformational and essential for committed couples is that the act of sex is collaborative, not just physically, but when you're talking about conversations and not taking things personally, you know, if when you talk about how you'd like to experience sex in a different way, asking your partner to slow down or speed up or more pressure or whatever the case may be that you desire, it's one thing if you approach it like, this is what I want. Will you give this to me? Which is, that definitely takes confidence. And we could talk about that. But what I think is really powerful when you are a committed couple, you know, you're going to be having plenty of sex together in the future, to really look at it collaboratively. Like, what would it take for us to enjoy this more? And then it's less about what do I deserve or how are you inadequate or any of these kinds of things. It's like, let's, I mean, it's not easy to have this conversation until it's very familiar, and then it is easy. But to really set up the conversation that we get to collaborate on creating something amazing for each of us and both of us together, that is totally different than, I want to enjoy this more, and I'm not sure if I can ask for it. The fact is that when you as a woman experience more pleasure, your partner will experience more pleasure. This is one of the really profound, smart, sneaky, real things about porn, that men are wired to enjoy witnessing and experiencing other people's pleasure. So that is what porn is. Whether or not the people on the screen are actually experiencing pleasure is not to the point. The point is that seeing that pleasure is a turn on. And when you're in bed with your partner and you are both experiencing pleasure and authentically allowing that to be perceived, that is super gratifying to your partner. And so if you have requests, the key thing is not to do it as a put down, but again, to do it like, it's going to be better for both of us. Let's try this.
Yeah, and I think that those conversations are difficult for a lot of people. And I know with like dating these days, and I have most of my friends, almost all of my friends are married, so I'm like the only one that's not married. But I know like dating these days, it's a little more difficult in a sense of like you have dating apps and people are gravitating to being intimate first and then deciding if they like each other later. But I
Well,
know.
that is a thing. I've said this often, that there are many people who are more comfortable having sex than talking about it.
Mm-hmm. 100%. I totally agree. And I was at a place in my life where I found myself in a lot of situationships and I just was like, I don't want this anymore. Like I want to build like true intimacy and a true connection with someone. So my partner and I like decided to wait and like really get to know each other on an emotional and mental level first and then explore the other things. But it was really, I think, beautiful. And I'm not, this works for me. I never say that like what I choose to do works for other people, but this is just a decision I made for myself. It created this safe space for us to have those uncomfortable conversations that I don't think I would have been able to have with someone else that I didn't already establish a mental or emotional connection with first. Still uncomfortable, but it felt safer. And I think that safety and vulnerability and like being able to hold space for each other is really, really powerful.
And the foundation of my marriage, and the foundation that I most highly recommend, is a commitment to personal growth. Like my husband and I have always been devoted to our own and one another's growth. And that softens the awkwardness,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like, well, we both want to grow. This is so awkward, but we both want to grow. And you obviously have an incredible commitment to personal growth, and it's hard to imagine you'd find someone attractive unless that person did as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that in this weird way, a mutual commitment to personal growth actually serves us better, if I need to compare, it's a little artificial, than love.
Mm.
Like loving one another isn't enough to push through those kinds of conversations. But a commitment to your own growth means, yes, I'm going to be uncomfortable knowing that I'm going to learn. Maybe it'll go well. That'll be magnificent. Maybe it won't. We'll need to feel awkward and contorted and for a few days, and then we'll find our way back. Like all of that in the context of growth and evolution has its place. And I have to say that I wouldn't take back any awkward conversation that I ever had with my husband, because they've all led to where we are now. And when your lens is personal growth, you can expect that to be the case wherever you are in the journey in any given moment.
I love it. I love it. I've never heard it explained that way, but it makes so much sense. And I remember our initial conversation talking about conscious relationships. And to me, that is how I define a conscious relationship, is both people being committed to personal growth. And yeah, I think that is definitely one of the things that connects my partner and I. Just we both are extremely committed to our own growth, and we lean in like Brene Brown says, like lean in, and we're just like, all right, this is uncomfortable, but we're doing this. And it's it's helped me grow so much, and I think that having those uncomfortable conversations is usually what brings people closer together, right? Like
Yes.
that's increasing your connection to each other. And I mean, isn't that kind of the goal? Like you grow yourself, but you're also growing together. Maybe sometimes. I don't
Yes.
know.
No, I actually, I think that that is true. And in fact, when a couple is in a more disconnected phase, in my opinion, it's usually because one or both of them isn't saying something that needs to be said. Because it's too awkward. There actually are multiple reasons people don't share it. Either they don't know what they have to say, like they don't know what they actually want, they just know they're dissatisfied,
Mm-hmm.
or they don't want to say it because they don't want to hurt their partner's feelings, or they don't want to say it and they're okay hurting their partner's feelings. They just don't want to have to deal with the aftermath and the consequences. But these three things really have us not express things that we have to express to get to the next level of connection.
Mm. Yes. So I can talk about this all day.
Me too, me too.
But I know we have to wrap up soon. So I usually end with like, what are your top 3 tips for living an abundant life? But I like it to be more connected to intimacy since that is the topic. So 3 tips for building intimacy.
Okay, well, the first tip is something that is disarmingly simple, so easy to be like, that's not valuable. And anyone who's actually done it has gotten tremendous value, including me. This is something that I learned from Regina Thomashauer, which is multiple times a day or once a day. You can set your alarm for 3 times a day to just stop what you're doing and write down, I feel, fill in the blank however you feel. And that is a right way to feel. I feel anxious, and that is a right way to feel. I feel numb, and that is a right way to feel. That is my first tip. And it pertains to a lot of what we've talked about. Like that's a way to honor your experience and make it one of the real data points. It's a way to actually check in and notice how you're feeling, because most of us who are highly competent, high achieving, focused people, we are moving through our day not actually paying attention to how we feel. And so this exercise brings that. So that is tip 1. Tip 2 is, if there's anything that you want your partner or really anyone else to really hear, and you feel like you've said it and they haven't understood or they haven't noticed, or you're not being received in the way you desire, the key is to say it with more vulnerability. And put very simply, if you want more from the other person in the way of a response, bring more of yourself, and you're likely to experience that. That's tip 2. Tip 3, I want to make it about sex, so give me a minute. The next time that you're having sex or a makeout or anything where you're connecting your body and another person's body, in the way that you would keep bringing your attention back to your breath when you meditate, bring your attention back to your physical sensations and just see and notice, observe how delightful and fulfilling the experience is when you do that. Those are my tips.
I love it. I love it. I love like the second one, bring more of yourself, because we do tend to want more, but are we bringing more of ourselves? And just a lot of times our partners mirror us. And I love that one. So juicy. And the third one, so juicy too. I love it. So where can people find you online?
My website is alexandrastockwell.com, and I'm most active on my personal page on Facebook, which is easy to find. I have a business page, and I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn, but I'm most active on my personal page. And I have a Facebook group called Heat Up Your Marriage, and there are some single people in there and people in relationships who aren't married, and that's really where I continue these kinds of conversations. So come join me there.
And you have a podcast with your daughter, right?
Yes, I do. It's called What Should I Do? She's 23. She's going to be 24 this month. And I actually at one point thought of one of the episodes. It's called Is Sex for You or Your Partner? It's episode number 2. And anyone who's listening to this conversation, I think would find that super interesting. And the other episode that would be interesting is with a woman who's 29 and newly divorced. And we talk about how to really bring all of yourself in a relationship and how you can notice when you're not doing that. So yes, if you're interested in podcasts, check us out. What Should I Do is the name of it.
Awesome. I will have the link for that and your website in the show notes. Definitely go check her out. So much juiciness. I love, I think that before I really dove into intimacy, I didn't see the importance of what you offer. And now that I'm deep in it, I'm just so much amazingness. So much amazingness. So definitely go check her out, whether you're single, dating, or in a relationship. I think that you have so much value to offer people who have been married for a long time. So thank you so much for coming on the show again. And just
wait, yeah. And I have a gift for listeners. I didn't mention that, but I've written my book. It's called Uncompromising Intimacy. And anyone who's interested in that conversation, I think you're going to enjoy the book. And I want to offer the first chapter to download it for free. So you can put that in the show notes too. Anyone who's interested, the name of the chapter is Companionship as Good as It Gets?
I love it. I love it. So I will have that in the show notes. So definitely go check her out. Thank you so much for coming on the show again. I love this conversation. Loved it. And until next time, M&Ms, be decadent. Thank you for tuning in to the Abundance Hack Show. I would love to hear from you. Leave your comments and questions, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our yummy episodes. Every time you leave a 5-star rating or review, I do my happy dance.